Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We have the pleasure of having one of our team members with us, Marguerite Minelski. And Marguerite will be presenting on user acceptance testing. What is it and when is it enough? As a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we will post it to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And you can find our library under our resources tab on our website at inovia.com. We do encourage you to ask questions during our presentation, so please feel free to type them into the questions box and we will answer them at the end of our session. So now I'm going to turn it over to Marguerite to kick off our presentation.
Hi, Angie, and welcome everyone. Today's topic, as Angie touched on, is going to be user acceptance testing. What is it and when is it enough? Little bit of history about myself is that let me get the correct slide, there we go. My name is Marguerite Minelski again. I come from the user side initially, and I was a user for about 12 years. I've been at Inovia almost 4 years. Within that time frame on the user side, I worked through everything from basic parts puller up into the final stint was called Director of Business Intelligence, which was basically a nav admin. I've touched on pretty much every part of the system. So, you know, you're going to hear some stories about some of the issues that I've actually encountered with user acceptance testing, both on the user side and on the Inovia side. So hopefully that allows us to build a better position to get your projects, whether big or small, over the finish line and make them successful. And that right there is the key word, success. So one of the main things that we always question is, you know, how successful is our projects? And as we can see in this slide, recent studies have shown that only 14% of software projects are actually considered successful. What is successful? Successful is literally that, it's a success. We have gone through our outline of our scope, we have gone through testing, we have implemented our product, and everyone is happy. It is now better for our business. But then we also have the unfortunate opportunity that there are going to be failures. And we will see that there are 19% of all projects are considered, you know, failures. And towards the end of this, we'll kind of touch on some of those that, you know, I was even surprised when I learned about companies that had specific failures. So we have to remember, no matter how big or small the project is, we can make it successful, we can make it a failure. And then there's the opportunity to just make it a done project. Done projects are just that. Nobody walks away feeling, you know, super confident, like, all right, we're happy, you know, everything is smooth sailing. Oftentimes these are the projects that everybody's just like, oh, thank God it's done. You know, you don't care if it's a success, it's just in. And we kind of make it status quo. And that's not where we want to be, whether on the Inovia side or on the client side. We always want it to be a success. So how do we get there? Using our user acceptance testing. So we have two key pieces to testing. We have what is called user acceptance testing and user testing. Oftentimes people, you know, myself included, I went testing is testing. You know, what does it matter? So user acceptance testing is a verification process. This is confirming that everything that we're doing and seeing is correct, not just that we can complete the task. You know, an example is sales orders. Excuse me. A lot of clients use ISVs as an example, and we'll use any shipping solution. And we can post from our sales order. We can go to our sales order and we can say, yep, I have 5 pieces. I want to post 5 pieces. And I've posted my sales order. That's user testing. I haven't really tested it. I haven't accepted the process. But what user acceptance testing is now I'm going to walk through the entire process. I'm going to make sure that my flow is correct. It matches my business logic and what I'm trying to accomplish. So with an example of an ISV, we have things such as creating shipments, creating picks, posting through any number of worksheets depending on the ISV, and freight charges that roll backwards. Are all of these steps being completed? Can I then say that, yes, I have successfully posted a sales order? So with that, we have to look at those opportunities. Are they successful? Are they failures? Are they user acceptance testing? Or are they just user testing? So we have to ask this question. And I'm sure a few of you have seen the round to it. And I am a person who have actually had this presented to me because I would say, hey, I'll get right to that. And that tends to be one of the biggest issues with UAT failures is we always say we'll get round to it. But we also have, did we not properly lay out a testing plan? How did we not do that? We all think in our minds like, not that difficult. You go, you enter a sales order, you post the sales order. But in a few moments, we'll kind of touch base and how do we build out that plan? Do we have the correct UAT users? So in reality, we all tend to do the same thing. We all say, I'm going to pull XY person because I know that they can do it. They have the time, or they will ensure that the testing gets done in a timely fashion. But are they the best user to test? Are they the user that uses it every day? Are they a user that you feel comfortable with that will raise their hand and say something's not correct? Or are they just kind of one of those yes people that say, yep, it's good? And we all have that. We've all seen it. And we've probably all lived through working with those users if we ourselves weren't one of those users. UAT environments. Do we have a good environment? Oftentimes we don't just throw stuff into a production database and say, go for it. We set up some testing. Does that database have the correct objects installed or extensions? Have we configured our processes correctly? Do we have sales orders, setups? All the different pieces that ultimately play into creating our test environment to replicate what we are trying to accomplish. Communication, touching back with those users. Are those users communicating? Are we, as the people that are, whether we're the testers or we're project leads, are we communicating? Or are we just, again, going, yep, it's good. And then we go home and we stress out like, oh, I can't rely on Stacy to finish that tonight, so I'm going to have to go and do that. And that's not necessarily the best option because we're not getting the proper communication. And are our users willing to adapt to our changes? A lot of times users get very comfortable with their processes. When you try to present something in front of them and say, that will, they'll be like, nope, that will never work. I'm a product of that. I worked for a company and we had a purchasing department that in 2015, they were still printing out spreadsheets upon spreadsheets and reviewing those and trying to make decisions. And I was tasked with getting those papers out of their hands and pushing them to requisition worksheets. They were not very comfortable and willing to adapt, but I had to keep pushing. And then lo and behold, requisition worksheets that they had been convinced for probably 15 years would not work for our business, all of a sudden changed the way our business was being processed. And then we were able to build even further and bring in an ISV to really push that. And even then they were still hesitant and we just had to keep plugging along and going, this is going to work, this is going to work. We're gonna figure it out. We have a good partner. We have good ISV support. We're gonna do this. And we just kept pushing forward. And while they were hesitant to change, they did. And the business changed drastically in how we handled our inventory, the money that we then had to use within the business. All of a sudden, everything changed. And we just had to keep looking and going, if we wouldn't have tested and we wouldn't have kept pushing, this would not be possible. That in 2022, they would still be functioning the same way that they did in 1993. And we know that that's not a good situation. So how do we really ensure that users are testing? This is the biggest question that everybody seems to encounter. And it's never an easy one to answer in real life. On paper, super simple. I tell you to tell somebody to go do it, they go do it, and they report back. And then in the perfect world, it all worked out great. But that's not reality. Reality is that we really have to schedule our users. We have to tell them they have to do it at this time. Put meetings on calendars. We know that they're going to have issues, and we know it's going to take time. But if we can get them in there, if you can say, my sales team, you need to enter orders once a week. We're on this upgrade from a 2015 database to a Business Central SaaS. We have a few ISVs that don't really touch our sales team, but we need you to keep entering orders because something's going to come up. And it may not be come up initially when they're entering their sales orders. But if we don't have sales orders, my warehouse cannot ship and they cannot receive. So we have to just keep pushing. So one of the things that I've actually become accustomed to seeing now is what we are calling conference room pilots. This doesn't mean that somebody sits in a conference room and holds somebody's hand and holds them 100% accountable. In some instances, companies do need that and they do like that. In other instances, they just want to be left alone. I know how to do my job. Let me go do it. But as the project manager, we can't just trust that they're going to find the time. We know business changes. Things happen. I live in a place with snow. People don't come to work because it snows. So now my entire schedule gets changed. But when a user thinks to themselves, yeah, I'm not going to make it to work today because I can't get there. In their mind, they're going, oh man, I got to reschedule that meeting. Now they have to think about how they're going to adjust their schedule and they're stressed. But we take the time and we say, I gotcha. I know you didn't come in today. It snowed. We'll talk tomorrow when you get back and we'll get that rescheduled. Then when they come back in, they're able to sit down, whether it's that day or whatever day we've now determined, they can test their processes. If you set up Teams meetings, go-to meetings, whatever way that you as a business record, these are perfect opportunities. One opportunity is we then know that they tested. We can prove it. There's no them saying, I did that, but I don't know what database I was in, so I don't know why you don't see what I'm seeing. We now have proof. It sounds terrible to say, but proof that the user tested. We then have recordings that if issues arise, we know what steps were being taken. They can go and recreate it because what happens? They put down and they notate that something didn't work. And then in 2 weeks, when we finally can get to them and talk to them, they're looking at us like we're crazy. I don't remember what happened. I know it didn't work, but I don't remember why it didn't work. So now we can go and we can look at those recordings. If we need to engage our partners, we have a recording. We don't have to keep interrupting that user's day. We can say, hey, on this recording, let me grab this snippet from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. This proves out exactly what was going on. And I can give it to my partner. I can give it to my IT company, whoever I need to give it to, if it even needs to go to Microsoft. we can then show them if another user needs to check it. So oftentimes you have someone like a nav admin, and they have a really good understanding of processes, and they'll watch it and they'll go, not what I asked you to do. We can then go back and say, hey, I saw you were trying to do it this way. That's not the way it's going to work anymore. I need you to test it this way. And now it doesn't feel so like nerve-wracking, because oftentimes users tend to get nervous when somebody's looking over their shoulders. And, all of us tend to make when somebody's watching, we can't type for anything. We all do it. And it takes a little bit of that pressure off. And I found that when users can do this, their testing is more accurate. They don't get as frustrated. Creating sign-off sheets that will, I have a sample that we'll talk about in a couple moments. These sign-off sheets are perfect opportunities to also record everything. So one of the big things that we see is users go, yep, I tested that, but did they? They may have said they did because they thought they did, but maybe they didn't complete the step because of errors. And then the final piece is we have to look at them to keep pushing multiple scenarios, over the course of days, weeks, months, depending on what your time frame is. Because the other piece that we see is users go and we put in an ISV, and they go and they test, and they go, well, my part works. And then it takes another 3 to 4 months for it to flush its way all the way through the process. Or if we're working with a go live, if we're doing a full implementation, guess what? All of a sudden it's 6 months later, and that person goes, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do. But if they're doing it regularly, and I'm not saying that a sales team needs to be doing orders every single day, but they should go in there maybe once a week, spend 5 minutes, enter 1 or 2 sales orders. Just keep reminding themselves, especially if there's like a drastic change in the way the process is going. Shipping is a good example. If you are using any shipping solution, or if you're not using a shipping solution, but you're moving to a shipping solution, those processes change. We have several shipping solutions that function very similar, but when you look at them, they function just a hair different. That if you don't think about it, all of a sudden you're like scratching your head going, wait, how was I supposed to handle that particular function? And it makes it a little bit easier, because if they're constantly being reminded, it's going to make that process that much better at go live. Now, this exists both from the large project scale all the way down to a very teeny tiny project scale on support. And if you go to a support ticket and you say, hey, I just need to change some, the way the fields print on the report. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and go through all these scenarios. But what you're doing is you can say, well, I already have a bunch of sales orders. I'm really just looking for how this report prints. Let me just run 2 or 3 copies. If we're looking for, say, tracking number to be populated on a, say, an invoice, on a pick tick, or on a packing slip, any number of things, I always encourage everybody, test FedEx, test UPS, test maybe an LTL just to see what results you get. And that just gives you the peace of mind that we've confirmed we're getting the results we want. Because we're busy. We all say we print one report, it works. Hey, go ahead, put it in live. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, well, I didn't get tracking number for that. So we have to just do our due diligence to make sure that our users are testing. So with that said, how do we build a UAT sign-off list? Well, the first piece has got to be that very high level. What will make this a success? Do I want to be part of that 19% that says, nope, that was a complete train wreck? Do I want to be part of that 65% that's just like, the project's done, let's move on? Or do I want to be part of that 19% that I get to sit there and say, we as a team were able to successfully implement whatever? And me personally, having been part of so many different, I want to be part of that 19%. My first opportunity at Innovia was on a go live, and that go live went so well that I stood there and I went, oh man, go lives are so simple. We did something terribly wrong when we implemented our system. And it's not that we did something wrong and they did something right per se. It was just they never stopped testing. Somebody was testing every single day. So they knew what they wanted to accomplish, and they still accomplished it. And if you ask them today, they would probably look at you and shrug their shoulders and go, yeah, I mean, it was an implementation. We still had some hiccups. So they didn't consider it a success because they had hiccups on things that they happened to miss on their side. But they were small, very, very small. We have to outline our processes. What processes are we looking at? If we are doing a full upgrade or re-implementation, we have to look at every process. We can't just trust that our process that worked in 2015 is going to slide right over to Business Central. More than likely it is, but we don't know. Is there an ISV in play that maybe nobody even knows about? Maybe it's been there longer than the people that are running the project are involved in. Is there something that's going to change? Workflows that need to come into play? All those different things, we have to look at them and look at them by a department and then look at them by a task. With that, we have to assign an owner to every task that will be handled. This owner is not necessarily the person that's going to actually be doing the testing. This is your owner who is going to go and review. So if you're a project manager, a nav admin, you have a lot of things on your plate. You're trying to keep all these balls rolling and keep your project moving and get all your updates to your management team, and trying to go and check in with everybody. And you got 50 different people, it's going to be hard. We're not going to get good information. But if I can look to my purchasing team, and maybe it's my purchasing manager who is going to be the owner, because they're going to know the process. They're going to be the one as the manager to say yes or no, everything is good. But maybe they don't have the time to be the person doing the testing on every process. So they have to look to their team, and their team is going to pick up those opportunities to do the testing. So that's when we then have to have our key testing users. Those users are those day-to-day users. I was one of those users. I was not the owner. I was the key tester. I pushed the processes through. I communicated with my manager and said, here's where it's working, here's where it's failing. And then that information went to my nav admin. And then we laid out a plan as a team. Sometimes she did it and she told us what we needed to do, or sometimes we had meetings. But we were constantly in some type of communication. And at no point did I ever look at myself until I actually had this conversation and talked about it. I was a key tester. I was not the owner, but man, did I feel like I owned that project. And you talk to people and they'll say, she owned that project, and I'm going, I didn't own it. It was a team effort. And it took that proper communication to understand that. And then making sure that we have time for those users. Again, time in a warehouse is so hard to come by these days. When we think somebody's going to have time, they don't. So if we sit there and say, again, I'm going to put it on your calendar, I'm going to hold you responsible. If you don't test in the time that I'm looking at it, I need you to have a good reason. We don't want to be so rigid that our staff looks at us and says, oh God, because they're not going to make our projects successful. We have to kind of be rigid, but still fluid, because things do change. but we also don't want to be so fluid that our project's just going sideways and then we have to explain to management what just happened. So we have to work together as a team. And that is the piece that I find is most often missing when it comes to user acceptance testing. People get siloed and they're like, I just got to go in and test these processes and that's it. And it's like they just put pass, fail, and there's no communication to the other team members. And that's a dangerous thing because every team member does it just a slightly bit different. And that may make the difference because they may have something that you're not aware of. So key testers need to also have open communication between themselves, but also to their owners. And if we don't have all that communication and making that time for them to test, something will get missed. So how do we create a sample sign-off? This has become my new pet peeve. I may make it overly complicated when I explain it, but I will tell you that at the end of the day, when we do it this way, we can walk away and know that it was done correctly. So in this example, I created just a basic spreadsheet. Currently, actually, this is being used on a project. So this isn't just a throw it out there and have you guys run with it. This is a living, breathing document that is actually working in Innovia. So feel free, take it, build your own, and that's why you'll see things like external user and internal user. On this document, you see 3 lines that are highlighted orange. These were the 3 lines that when the client handed us testing scenarios, that's what they gave us. And they said, my favorite. And this actually came out of a quality manager, which made me laugh because he is all about processes. Review all tabs, fields, columns, fact boxes to ensure that pertinent info is available. To me, hey, that's a very pretty sentence and it makes you sound super important. But how does that play out for testing? Because what's the first thing that's going to happen? They're going to go live and they're going to raise their hand and say something's missing. And we're going to have a conversation that says, where was that tested out? Well, it was right here. Well, where was it tested out? I don't know what your pertinent information is. So that user can go and say, hey, it passes. But when we break it out into the different pieces that they're looking for, can the user see fact boxes? Do cross-references exist? Can they, and I see that I have a typo, can they confirm that notes are visible? How about if they create a new note? Are all of those passes? Well, if we look at our example we put up here, no, because Bob is not the person that uses those every day. So Bob looks at what he thinks is pertinent and says, sure, it passes. But Jim is our day-to-day user. And he looks and he does his testing and he goes, ooh, I don't see the cross-references. I'm going to mark this as a fail. And not only does he mark it with a fail, but he has now notated what he tested with. Because it's important to know, because what's going to happen? He's going to test with item 1, 2, 3, and Sarah's going to test with item 5, 6, 7, and he's going to say it fails, and she's going to say it passes. But no matter what, something's a fail because Jim's expecting different results or he's expecting results that he's not getting. So we have to look at why that is. Maybe there's just no cross-reference for that item and he didn't realize it. Or maybe something is wrong with the data and we need to go look and say, our data is not right. In the second example, we have Sarah. Sarah enters a sales order. She says it passes. Well, any of us that work with any kind of shipping and shipping solutions know there's a lot more to that. We have a lot of working pieces. Small parcel, UPS, FedEx, DHL. Are we a company that uses next day air? or Saturdays? Can users find those? Any of you that are using the multiple shipping solutions know those fields exist in different places. So can they find them, especially if you're making a move from one ISV to another? Maybe they just go, whatever, I can enter a sales order. Go live comes, and it may be 4 months down the road and they go, I don't know how to enter a Saturday delivery. And then somebody's not happy because, well, why don't you know? So we have them, and we've outlined all the different ways. LTL shipments. If you have multiple LTL carriers, depending on how you're getting those LTL information, you may need to test each one. If you're using like a rate shopping function, you want to test putting in FedEx LTL and R&L and Holland and make sure you're getting the correct rates. Whether it's you're doing that on the sales side or the warehouse is checking on the LTL, we need to make sure that we test it. Testing sales orders with no inventory. Do users get the notification? Oftentimes users go, they've made modifications in their current database and they get this big warning box. Well, in Business Central, we get the notification at the top. And some users are okay with that. Some users are not. And some users will say it completely doesn't work because guess what? They turned off the notification and they didn't even know that they did it. So we have to have users test things like that. Do we get notifications for partials? Let's make sure that we sit there and we've stated that I've tested with these different orders. And again, now we know which ones to reference. Same thing with, completing a sales order. This was the same thing I referenced earlier. Complete a sales order, enter a sales order, click post, it's done. But that's not our process anymore. Our process now is this shipping solution. Can I create picks? Can I create shipments over, the different warehouse configurations and what information is required? Can I ship a UPS order? In this example, UPS fails. But every other thing works. So now we have to look what failed. I probably should have put a better note on here, but you can put on here in your testing notes, UPS account number not valid, not found. Oh, well, let me go look at my UPS account number. Things like that, because every other piece works. So I know I can ship, but can I ship exactly the way that I need to? So one of our common things, everybody's like, oh, what are some of your most common oops moments when it comes to UAT? And we've seen this many times. Printers. Printers is one of my, I don't know what to do with printers. Oftentimes users, 1 to 2 users, will test the printing function, whether that means printing pick tickets, printing pack slips, printing UPS and FedEx labels. 1 to 2 users tend to do the testing for that process. And then go live comes and we've been down, the business has been closed for, half of Friday and all weekend. So now we're backed up. We're stressed because we know we're backed up. We're stressed because we know we've changed our processes. And then users come in and lo and behold, right out the gate, they don't get labels. They don't get their documents. And now we have to go scramble, whether consultant or an internal. On the client side, we're scrambling and like going, oh, okay. Well, you just keep on going and doing what you can without the printer and I'll work on that. It's not successful. This one's one of my favorites. Users who were never in the system. So everyone should go in a system. We should have our key users that are owning it, our users that are testing. And then once we get through those, depending on how many more users we have, we may have users that need to be trained. And my favorite is those users that come in on a Monday and they go, I don't even know where to go to open the system, let alone how to do my job. So everybody's like, how did that happen? Oh, well, she was out, for 2 weeks because she had COVID. Well, this has been an implementation that we've been working on for 6 months. Her being out for 2 weeks should have had no bearing on this. Workstations where software is not installed. This was often more of an issue with on-prem versions, but even with SaaS versions, there are ISVs that have dependencies on workstation dependencies, things like print queues or some of the shipping solutions. You have to have a specific module installed and configured for your particular workstation to work correctly. And again, nothing worse than walking in and you have 8 shippers and only 3 of them can ship first thing Monday morning. Key users who are the only ones that did testing start to end. Same thing like I said before, users go in, they either don't know how to do the task, or the worst thing is their permissions are incorrect. The biggest mistake that often is found with user acceptance testing is people fall into the, I'll just make them a super user and let them test. Yes, but at what point do we pull those permissions back? We don't want all of our users to have super permissions all the time. Only a handful of users really should have super permissions. So we have to look at those and say, hey, did we get them their right permissions? Did I give them permission at all? One of my favorites is that when you have clients that go through and they have department-specific permissions. So you have a person who works in the warehouse and they log in and they have permissions assigned to a sales role. Now they can enter a sales order, can't do anything else with it, but hey, they can make one. How did we get to that point? We should have tested. We should have confirmed their permissions and make sure that they can do all their processes. Custom processes. This is another big one. Nobody tends to think of those one-off scenarios. So it takes us back to our spreadsheet. Everything that happens within your business should be recorded. As tedious as it seems, it's the only way that we can guarantee that is a success. Because, I know processes change. I built some custom processes that people on the Innovia side look at me and go, how in the heck would we have ever figured that out without either one having, I think it's like 3 key users on the client side, or having you? No one would have ever thought to outline it, because one, the key people on the user side were not on the calls to help create the testing opportunities. And did we look at those? Even if they're not on them, did we give it to those key users that are the owners? Did you look through? Did I give it to my quote super user who's testing? Have they confirmed? Have them have that spreadsheet as they're walking through their day-to-day activities today, and they can go, yep, I do those, and those. Oh, and then they go, oh, you know what, that one off, let me go add that to the worksheet. I know I'm not testing for 6 months, but I need to start building out my testing opportunities now, because there's another opportunity for failures. We don't test one-off one-off scenarios that may rely on custom function, custom code, or just knowledge. We have to ensure that all of those are addressed. The last one is reports. Reports often seem to get missed. Users don't sign off on reports, or we have the wrong users signing off on reports. One of my favorite ones that I've recently seen is a pick ticket that I looked at and I scratched my head as a consultant. I scratched my head as a former user. And I said, I looked at the person and I said, okay, I see that your design is requesting to add the unit cost and the total cost for that line to the pick ticket. And I looked at him as a former warehouse person and said, can I ask the logic behind that? I wasn't afraid to speak up. May not have liked the answer I heard, but I was willing to speak up. And the response was, oh, well, the thought is that if the warehouse can see how much it's worth, they're going to pay more attention on how they pack it. I'm going to be blatantly honest, as a warehouse person, no, they're not. They're going to not even pay attention to that. So does it make sense to have that on there? My opinion, no. So when I went back and had a conversation with this person and I explained the reasons I had the thoughts that I did, he had a very valid reason, but he's a sales manager, not a warehouse person. I need the warehouse telling me what they need on that pick ticket to make them successful. Do they need something that when it's over X amount of dollars, they get, it stands out? Maybe that's what they need, but they're not going to look at a cost. To them, they don't care. It's the sad reality is that people are there for their jobs and they don't think about how it affects the other parts of the business. So we as project managers and nav admins have to remember that these people are trying to do their job. And if they have to keep looking at all these little pieces that don't have as much bearing on their day-to-day job, they tend to miss opportunities too. And maybe that was a good opportunity, but maybe it just didn't fit their business with the way that they were configured at the moment. So with that being said, who are some of these failed opportunities? These, I will be honest, I was in awe. Nike lost over $1 million because they could not ship Air Jordans because their team didn't know how to use the software. They went live and said, we'll figure it out. They were so rigid on a go live date, cost them $100 million. I don't know about you guys, but I would love to have $100 million throw away. Avon, same kind of thing, $125 million. They ended up having to kind of scrap it a little bit because their high-level sales reps couldn't even get into the system, had no idea how to open a system. Well, they couldn't do anything, and Avon wasn't willing to kind of make some moving, and you had users couldn't open systems, and then you had others that started feeling like, you know what, they're not investing in me, I'm not investing in them, and I'm out the door. And that's the other piece. We spend a lot of money training people. Do we want to keep training them? It's easier to train one person and keep them and let them, build a career within the company. And then maybe, as they advance through the company, we hire in another person and train them. That's a way better investment than somebody feeling that they're not getting trained. They leave a company and then you keep doing the same thing. And before you know it, you've trained 10 people in the past 12 months and none of them have stayed. And now you're right back in the same position. You've just wasted a ton of hours training people for them to leave. Hershey's Candy. This was another one. I never would have thought of Hershey's Candy as somebody that wasn't a well-oiled machine. But to find out that, again, they didn't properly train their employees and they went live and all of a sudden $100 million worth of Hershey Kisses and Jolly Ranchers could not leave the door. They had no way to ship them. They didn't know what to do. EDI, that's another example. Did we test our EDI functions to make sure that we can ship them? That's a big missing oops that I actually oopsed and forgot to put on there is EDI. Did we test all of our trading partners? Did we test all of our documents? It's very easy to go and feel comfortable and say, yeah, I tested with 1 or 2 partners, I'm good. But any of us that have worked with those larger places, Walmarts, is Walmart is a perfect example. Amazon, Sam's Club, who's also associated with Walmart, they tend to have some different requirements than some of the other small ones. And it makes it difficult. We have to make sure that we've tested both the small guys and the big guys, because at the end of the day, they all help us pay our bills. And if we lose them or we fail to meet those requirements, it can have devastating results. Anybody who works with the automotive industry, those fines are insane. So I can spend, 16 hours of testing. That's still way less money than if I can't ship material. It's a scary number when you start looking at those. So with that being said, again, this is a high level, user acceptance. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Marguerite. No questions have come through yet. If anybody has any, now's the time to get them in. While we're waiting, Marguerite, is there anything that you would like to wrap up with?
The only thing I have is just, it doesn't matter how big your project is, make sure you're testing. Do that user acceptance testing. It's a very important piece that at the end of the day saves your business so much money. And, if you ever have questions about how do I build, do I have enough tasks on here? Or, maybe you need to talk about who your users should be or what the roles should be. Feel free to contact any person at Innovia, your account manager. They're a great place to start. And this is one of those topics that everybody's ears perk up like little meerkats when you say, I want to talk user acceptance testing and how to make it successful. So, feel free to always reach out with questions, both to your account manager, your support team, your project team. We're all here to help you.
All right, Marguerite, I don't see any questions that have come through. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you everyone for attending. And if you're watching on demand, we thank you for taking the time out to join us. You can check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. We will be adding more for 2023, just putting some last minute touches on some before we get those posted. And I also want to let you know about some training workshops that we have available. You can check out our training workshop page at innovia.com/workshops. We have a variety of workshops to fit your role, so check out the one that's right for you and your team. And if you have not heard the latest Innovia Conversation podcast, we have a library of podcast episodes for you to listen to, and you can learn more on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. We do have exciting news on our events for 2023. Our conference page is live and up on our website, so you can visit that at innovia.com/conferences. We will be joining DynamicsCon Live in May in Scottsdale, Arizona. So please read up on all that information and register for both conferences. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and we will pick back up on our webinars in January. Take care, everyone, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.